Hey, what's up, y'all? Y'all good? Y'all, let's get into this recap of the Earth, Wind, and Fire documentary that is on HBO Max. And if you haven't seen it, I think you should check it out if you like, the background of music groups and artists. I think that you will really like it. So when it first starts off, it's like a montage of the group at different concerts, photo shoots, things like that. Maurice said that he felt like Earth, Wind, and Fire came from a dual need, a need for himself to, figure out who he was and for the world, because he was all about people getting along, about joy, and just being happy. He was the visionary. He was very dedicated to the group, to the work, to his visions. And we move into his childhood. So Maurice was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, Foot Home Projects. Shout out to South Memphis. At 5, his mother left him because it was hard trying to take care of both of them during that time in Memphis. It was just the two of them. They had no other family. The only thing that she could do in Memphis at the time was scrub floors for the white folks. So she decided to leave and go to Chicago. And he was raised by a lady that was called Big Mama. She was not related to them because, again, they did not have any other family. Times were hard, so as he got older, he started doing a paper route in a white neighborhood, and one day a police officer harassed him for a very long time. He beat him, and after that, Maurice became very terrified. He was scared, kind of like a recluse. He became kind of like a recluse, but music was always his first love. It was like an escape. He said music is what saved his life. So he was influenced by blues, gospel, and jazz. He tried out for the band. He wanted to play the drums. He had never played the drums before, but he did make the band. And his childhood friend said that Maurice practiced like 5 hours a day, every day. So after he graduated from high school, his mother came back to get him, to take him back to Chicago. That's because that's where she went. She had started a whole new family. There were 8 kids. His sister said that when he arrived, he was very quiet. He kind of kept to himself. He avoided getting too close to people. She said he suffered from abandonment issues. So with music being his first love, he ended up getting a studio drummer position at Chess Records. And if you watch Cadillac Records, you know Chess Records. So Maurice worked with Don Whitehead. They created the Watu Wazuri jingle for Afro Sheen. And that became very popular, and that really kind of like kick-started his visions for having a group. He wanted a band. He loved to read, and he was inspired by the book Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill. And in Laws of Success, Napoleon said, when you want to manifest something into reality, write it out clearly. Tell the mind what you want, and you say it over and over again. So Maurice wrote that he wanted music for a universal audience. He wanted to evolve a consciousness through his music, and he wanted to change the world. He drew a picture of how his group would look, and he said that's what he set out to do. So he was working with Ramsey Lewis at Chess Records, but he left him to follow his heart. And in 1970, he left Chicago and went to California. Then we're introduced to Marlene White, his longtime life partner. He told her about his visions, and being the type of person that he was, she knew that it would happen. They met at like a health food type of store. He would come in all the time because he juiced, he ate healthy, and he was heavily into astrology. And in his chart, his heavier elements were earth, fire, and air, and he changed air to wind, and he said the rest was history. He had 3 songwriters who worked with him all the time, and that's what he formed the group around. And he brought his brother Verdine into the group, and he was around 18 or 19 years old. So in the beginning, the music was kind of like experimental jazz. Like they just went wherever the spirit took them. They ended up getting a contract with Warner Brothers, and they were more like a college group at first, like a niche band. They weren't connecting with the white audiences like Maurice wanted, and they weren't the typical R&B band. So they weren't getting as much work as he thought that they would get. And, of course, that caused resentment to start to build up in the group. So Marlene says that she doesn't think that some of the other members wanted Maurice to be the leader, even though it was his group. So enters Leonard Smith. He was Maurice's general manager, and he saw what was missing within the group, and he told Maurice that he wasn't going to achieve his goals with that group, and Maurice said he was already on it. And one day the group was called into a meeting, but neither Maurice nor Verdine was there. Maurice didn't like confrontation. Don said he was just chickish. So in the meeting, the 7 members were told that they were no longer a part of Earth, Wind, and Fire. So Don said he couldn't believe it because that was his brother. Like, we've been in this thing a long time, so why can't you just come and talk to me instead of just calling us into a meeting and you don't even show up? So Maurice said that the first band didn't work, but he wasn't going to give up on his dreams. He wanted a new sound and a new approach. So he brought in 7 new members. So they go to 1972. The new group performed at the Uptown Theater in Philly. And since they were so different, because they were on a lineup with like people like the Temptations, suits, choreography, and they weren't like that. Like, they just moving with the spirit. They got on their bell bottoms. They don't have on the shirt. So they just knew the crowd wasn't going to like them because they weren't, your typical group. When they came out, the folks started laughing at them. They started throwing cups and everything. So Maurice told the group to get in the lotus position. And the group was like, what the heck are they doing? So they was just watching them. The group just sitting in the lotus position. And eventually the crowd started to calm down. He would tell one member at a time to start playing their instrument. And when everybody started playing, the crowd, they got into it. And they won them over. In 1972, Maurice called Bob Cavallo. He got a deal with Clive Davis, Columbia Records, and that's when we got Last Days in Time and Head to the Sky. So they said that Maurice was always a reader. So he always had the group reading books about steps to greatness. And then, like I said, he juiced, he ate, simple. He had a very simple diet, and that's what he required of his bandmates. So whenever they went on tour, whatever, they all traveled together. They moved as a family. Whenever they would finish a show, they loved to play chess. They would have women braiding their hair. But Maurice, he didn't leave his room after a gig. He would always go back to his room and write down everything that happened that day, and to try to figure out where did those events fit into his goals and his vision. And Verdine said Maurice's goal was always to play arenas and stadiums. So they hooked up with George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic at the Washington Armory. They went on as his opening act. They did their thing, but after George them came out, the crowd went wild. Verdine said for 10 years, whenever he ran into George, he would always say, Verdine, you remember that time we tore y'all up on that stage? So Maurice was like, listen, this will never happen again. When we were out there, they were lukewarm. They gave us a little clap, clap, clap. But when George and P-Funk came out there, they went crazy. That's what we gonna have. We not doing this no more. So then Al McKay joined the group, and his job was to bring the funk. And they also brought in Maurice's other brother, Fred, and he played the percussion. And that's where you got the song Mighty Mighty. That was their first hit in black radio. Now Bob Cavallo tried to get the music on pop stations, but he felt the message that the white stations got wasn't we are people of the mighty, mighty, people of the sun, but mighty, mighty, unlive though, whitey. And because it was so Afrocentric, even with it being a joy-filled song, like just happy and positivity, he just didn't think they would resonate with a white audience. So Maurice, that's what he wanted. He wanted his music to be appreciated by everybody. So in 1974, there was a 12-hour rock concert called California Jam. It was kind of like a Woodstock. Earth, Wind, and Fire was the only black act on the bill. Maurice said sometimes you have to go against the grain. The crowd, hey, they enjoyed them. It was aired on ABC, and that really boosted their confidence. Maurice said every time he was able to accomplish something from an imaginary principle, that verified his faith. In 1975, The group went on a retreat in Colorado to record. Sig Shore Production was doing a movie called That's the Way of the World, and they wrote songs around that movie. And Maurice called in his mentor from Chess Records, Charles Stepney, to come in as their coach to handle arrangements and things like that. And That's the Way of the World was formed. The song That's the Way of the World. Hearts of fire, creating love's desire, take you higher and higher to the world you belong. Yeah, that's where that song came from. So Charles Stepney, like I said, did the arrangements on the song, and he became like their coach. Now, Maurice did a deep search for an engineer, and now enters George Massenburg. He was a recording engineer, and then they produced Shining Star. Stevie Wonder said he loved the arrangements on Shining Star, and that influenced him when it came to the arrangements and the message for his song I Wish, from the songs from his The Keys of Life album. And I don't even think we call that song I Wish. I can't even think of the lyrics. That song right there, that I don't think we called it I Wish. I don't think. But Shining Star was their first pop hit, and it was a turning point in their career, and it brought folks together, and they went from being opening acts to the headliners. They won their first Grammy in 1976 for Shining Star. They won for Best R&B Vocal Performance by a Duo, Group, or Chorus. And since their sound had changed so much, Maurice added a horn section. They had a period where everything they touched turned to gold, but then they got a call one day while in the studio that Charles had passed from a heart attack. And that passing was a trigger for Maurice. It took him back to when his father was unalive by someone who was not black. It was hard for him. It was hard for him to accept Charles' passing, but he saw that, look, even though it's affecting me, the world don't stop. In reality, everything keeps going. So to move forward, he started studying Egyptology, and he even went to the pyramids to meditate. He said he felt like he was getting help from the other side because he felt like he was evolving into a totally different person. He also studied Afrofuturism. His son said he talked to him sometimes about astral projections. He said there were times that he felt like he was being taken outside of his body. And he saw the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and that inspired the song Fantasy. So, fantasy, every man has a place, in his heart there's a space, and the world can't erase his fantasies. Yeah, that song. So then we get Bill Witham. He became their costume designer, and it changed their whole look. And he wanted their concerts to give a theater feel. Since he wanted that feel, he met with George Faison, who was the choreographer for the Broadway play The Wiz. And Maurice wanted George to stage their next tour. So with that tour, they brought in Doug Henning, who was a magician. And Maurice called him to bring magic into the production. And you will see, if on YouTube they had this concert where it looks like Verdine is levitating while still playing his instrument. Yeah. So then we get Bruce Telemann, who was the photographer, and he said he followed them everywhere they went and took photos from all different angles because he wanted to capture everything. He said when they started becoming the headliners, they went from just a few people to 20,000 people and more when it came to their concerts. Now, as far as interviewees or the commentators throughout the documentary, my forever president Barack and Michelle, they were one of the commentators, and Barack said that concert was the first concert that he went to. Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, he said he was heavily inspired by Verdine. Barack said watching Earth, Wind & Fire made him say, if they can do that, what can I do? Verdine said at that concert that Michael Jackson was there, Prince was there, and after the concert, Prince said that show almost made him want to quit. Then they got into the song Reasons, and Philip says, how can people think Reasons was a love song? He said no. One night he hooked up with this lady. Early in the morning he hear her on the phone with her dude. He said what he thought was love was just a late night hookup. So then they moved it to 1978. And Marilyn said one day Maurice told her that he loved her, but he didn't want to be married. And that was okay with her. She said, listen, we can just be life partners. I'll be your forever partner. Then a little while later, she gets pregnant. They had a son. She said he was a father, just an absentee father, because he was always working. His son said it was hard for Maurice to give hugs, but eventually it got a little better. It was that Maurice didn't know how to be a father. He said that Earth, Wind, and Fire was the most important thing to Maurice all the time. Maurice says he'll be in the studio like 12 to 14 hours because he was just that much of a perfectionist. So Maurice always told the band to never take success for granted, never get too comfortable. Then to expand his musical horizon, he opened what is called the Complex. He said it was to bring creativity under one roof. There were sound stages, 2 recording studios, video and film. He also opened a record company. He threw a party for the opening of the Complex, but he didn't invite the band. And Philip says it was a slap in the face. Like, you just forgot about us? We not that important to be included? Maurice said he was constantly busy. He produced for Barbra Streisand, Neil Diamond, Jennifer Holliday, Denise Williams, and The Emotions. He produced the song The Best of My Love for the Emotions. Leonard said one night he was paying the bills and he noticed that all the money that was coming in was going right back out. They were operating at a deficit. He said sometimes there would be like 60 to 70 people on the road doing tours. And Maurice even said that like from 1977 on, he came off the road at $500,000 in debt for every major tour Earth, Wind, and Fire did. He just felt like that was the cost of believing in his vision. And in 1979, Boogie Wonderland was put out, and that was their one and only disco song. He felt like, look, it don't seem like disco is going anywhere, so look, let's just put out a disco song. So then David Foster enters, and he was a record producer. He said a goal of his was to work with Earth, Wind, and Fire. With David Foster, they wrote the I Am album, and it went double platinum. But some members of the band didn't like that David Foster was writing their songs, and then Maurice started writing more of their songs, and that just took away a lot of the creativity from the rest of the members. They felt like they were being pushed aside. Phil said that they felt like they were just session musicians. So Marilyn, she said that Maurice was not faithful. He got someone pregnant while on the road, and she didn't find out until a few years later, but everybody else knew but her. And then a few years after that, he had another son. The youngest son said by the time he was born, his mom, who worked as a costume designer for the band, had been seeing Maurice for about 20 years. And Marilyn asked Maurice, like, how could you do her? Like, she was like, how can you do me like that? She said that his response was, because I'm a star. And she said the way that he said it came off like, I can do whatever I want to do. And she said that made her feel unworthy, and she knew that she wasn't unworthy, so she left. And Maurice couldn't believe that she left. Basically, baby, you may be a star, but I'm about to be a shooting star, and I'm gonna head right on out that door. So then they go into 1980, and the change in technology, it changed the music a lot. A lot of people were moving away from live music. Then he started working with Wayne Vaughn, the husband of Wanda from The Emotions, and that's where we got the song Let's Groove, and it went to number 3. So Johnny Graham said, to the outside world, it was love, but Maurice, he treated them differently. He knew how to make you feel small. Phil said they weren't getting paid right. They were only making like $2,500 a week. Larry Dunn, who was a songwriter and played the keyboard, said for the first 8 years, Maurice took everybody publishing. One of the managers felt like the whole band should have gotten co-producer credit, but Maurice felt like he should have been seen as the creative genius behind all of it. And you know how that go. band members started to leave, and then several albums after that, they were not successful. Where they used to be at number 3, they were down at number 85. And one day, the remaining members were called into a meeting because Maurice said he wanted to, do his own thing, and he was putting Earth, Wind, and Fire on the back burner. Everybody went their own way. Phil and his wife sold their property and moved to Denver. Ralph Johnson worked at a construction site, and he also sold stereos. Maurice said he just needed a break. His oldest son said that Earth, Wind, and Fire were a family. But Maurice essentially did to the band what was done to him as a child, and that was abandon them. He left them before they could leave him. Marilyn said Maurice called her and she told him that he had to let go of that pain caused by his mom, but he said he couldn't. His first solo song was Stand By Me, but it only went to number 62 on the chart. Now Philip Bailey, he started a solo career also, and he worked with Phil Collins. His song Easy Cover went to number 2. He said even though the song was a success, no one called to congratulate him. Phil said, yes, later on down the road, the record label did, suggest that they get Earth, Wind, and Fire back together. Phil said, listen, I will work with Maurice, but I'm not working for him. So when it came to Maurice and Verdine, they weren't speaking. It took Marilyn and Verdine's wife to get them to even just sit down and talk. Y'all are brothers. Y'all have done all of this amazing stuff. Just talk to each other. So once they talked, they made up and they were able to get the group back together. But Verdine said that Maurice did regret how he suddenly ended the group. In 1987, after everybody talked, he was able to get 5 of the original members back. And then they were going on a 11-month tour. They had high hopes, but when the band would take the stage, sometimes there would only be just a couple of people out there. So they had to cancel a lot of their arenas and do small venues, but they pushed through. They gradually gained, their momentum back, their traction, and then they were back to arenas and stadiums. Their music eventually started being played on TV shows, movies, commercials, and a lot of their songs was sampled by many different artists. Even the artist Her, she said that her dad taught her how to play the bass to Shining Star. And in 2000, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 2005, they did the Super Bowl with the Black Eyed Peas. In 2015, they did, I think it's called Bonnaroo with Kendrick Lamar and Chance the Rapper. 2016, they received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2025, they did Lollapalooza with Sabrina Carpenter. Then they rewind back to 1990, and I think it was Verdine or Ralph who said that it was clear that Maurice was not as strong as he was in the past. His sister said that she would notice that he would always put his right hand under his thigh, and that's when they learned that he had Parkinson's. And during that time, when he couldn't tour, he connected with his sons. He connected with his older son through music, the type of music that he liked. He wanted to learn more about it, and that's how they spent those last few years together. In 2016, the older brother said he got a call from his younger brother, and he told him that Maurice had passed. Verdine said that Maurice was like one of the beings from the pyramids. They only came around once in a lifetime. 2009, Michelle Obama said that when they went into the White House, they wanted to shake things up. And for the governor's ball, they invited Earth, Wind, and Fire. Marilyn said the song September was written because Marilyn, when she got pregnant, she told him, well, they said that the baby is going to come around September 21st. So that's where we get, do you remember? The 21st night of September, love was changing the minds of pretenders while chasing the clouds away. And then it ends with Barack saying that Earth, Wind, and Fire had the power to reimagine and reset limits. And they decided, we taking this thing to the sky. And that was the recap of the Earth, Wind, and Fire documentary that's on HBO Max. If y'all have not seen it, I think you need to go watch it. It is really good. And then when you start hearing the music, you can't do nothing but dance. But y'all let me know what y'all think. Let me know what your favorite Earth, Wind, and Fire song is. Thank y'all for subscribing. Thank y'all for checking out the videos. And I'll talk to y'all later.